right, I believe, is it live yet? Yeah. Well, I'm just waiting for the picture feed. There it is. Okay, we're good. Sound. I gotta check the sound just to make sure that we have sound here. Yeah, there's sound. Okay, we're good. All right, so welcome back to the 35th episode of the Hagwon Startup Podcast. The podcast addresses topics relevant to the discussion of anything and everything related to working in South Korea, as well as on the starting and operating of Hagwon and Gombubang businesses, as well as anything else related to the ESL industry in and around South Korea. I'm your host, Jack, located in the city of Ulsan, and today on the 26th of August, I'm joined by John Wurth. I believe that is the correct pronunciation of your name, John. Just a second.
Can you hear me, Jack?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Transition, here we go. There's John. John has spent many years working for non-profit as well as profit organizations. He has spent a significant amount of time working with organizations that hold children's welfare at heart, such as orphanages and children's homes. And currently, John is the founder and administrator of the Facebook group PALS, which basically takes care of legal matters related to people living in South Korea. Welcome, John.
Hey, how you doing, Jack?
Good. So, just wanted to make sure that I got your last name correctly, because I've been founder and administrator of. I've been wondering about that. Like, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Wurth. You got it correct.
Wurth. Okay. Okie dokie.
Mm-hmm.
Good. So maybe just. I'm sure, like for our listeners here, anybody who's been living in Korea for some time, they probably came across in one way, shape, or form with your Facebook group that's been around for some time.
Well,
maybe...
I want to take a quick step back there, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
PALS is not a Facebook group.
Okay.
Okay. I first came to Korea in 2007, and shortly thereafter, I worked with a group that started a national organization called ATEC for foreign teachers in Korea. Well, actually, just pure and simple foreigners in Korea. That organization did not survive, and I eventually broke away from that group and made PALS. That was in 2009. The Facebook page did not come along until much later.
Right.
So while the Facebook page is the most visible part of PALS, it is not PALS. PALS existed long before that Facebook page.
Okay, so what form was PALS present? I guess it was an online or an offline organization before actually the Facebook group showed up?
Mostly worked behind the scenes for years, especially after splitting off from ATEC. ATEC created a lot of waves and made a lot of negative publicity for anyone who was involved with it. It was just a real mess. Plus, there was a lot of noise from immigration. Oh, well, people involved with ATEC may be in violation of their visas, and we need to maybe do an investigation, blah, blah, blah. So it was better that I just worked quietly. And, after a couple months, I didn't see any reason to change it. It continued that way for about 5 years.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about what ATEC was exactly?
Okay. ATEC was an attempt to start a national organization for foreigners working in Korea. A lot of people aren't going to know this because they haven't been around long enough. But if you think stuff is bad now, it easily used to be 10 times worse.
You're referring to the working conditions in South Korea?
For foreign workers. Oh yeah. Rates of people tossed out on the streets are much lower than they were years ago when we first started an organization like ATEC. A lot of things have changed. Much less illegal firings. The labor law protections are much better. Immigration is much less strict in their crackdowns. They don't always take it out directly on teachers. A lot of things have changed.
Okay. So ATEC was taking care of teachers only, or just all foreign workers? I guess I'm like 2007. When I came here in 2005, the only people that I saw were basically white faces, right? It's the kind of the scene has changed drastically. There's a lot more people from Southeast Asia that come in for work that is other than just English teaching, right?
Right. Well, that's that's a growing trend in Korea, and that's part of the reason why things have changed so much for English teachers or language teachers, because English is not the only language that gets taught.
Sure.
But the Korean population is declining a lot. I'm sure we've all seen the projections saying by 2050 the population is going to be half what it is today. They're welcoming workers in now to head off the future population crisis.
Right. Okay. Well, how about we jump into a little bit into, there's some questions that people posted on PALS. You asked for questions and there were questions. Can you tell us about yourself a little bit?
Sure. Well, I'm American. I've worked in nonprofits for years. It's something I've always enjoyed. I guess it comes from growing up a church kid. Nowadays, if I try to step foot in church, they need to check their fire insurance first. But, that just always kind of stuck with me. If you have the opportunity to do something, do it. I've worked in children's orphanages, YWCA, YMCA, Boys and Girls Clubs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, a lot of different organizations over the years. Also worked in for-profit companies. Eventually, I wanted to travel more, ended up in Korea around the 2007 time period.
And did you have a job? Because most people coming here around that time were aiming to teach English, and I assume that this is not exactly the path that you took.
Actually, it is. Frankly, the salary was good enough. Not what I was used to making back then, but good enough. And I was only planning on staying for a year. Plus, I love working with the kids. So teaching, it's pretty much still working with kids. And I got basically what, for me at the time, sounded like the best of both worlds. My desire to work with kids and my desire to travel.
Okay. So your connection to Korea is pretty much clear now. What do you do now?
Nowadays, I am far away from South Korea. My ex-wife now, but my wife back then, actually made me leave Korea in 2014. It was much more her choice than mine. But by that point, I'd been in Korea for 7 years. Never planned on it being that way. It just worked out that way.
Right.
Plus, I basically fell in love with the country. Korea is a great place, as I'm sure many long-term expats know.
Can be, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are always things that are different, and of course we complain about those things amongst ourselves. But the fact is, we wouldn't stay if there weren't things we didn't like about it too.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It can grow on you surprisingly quickly.
Yeah. So, I guess the question that many people may be asking is, what is your legal background and what are your qualifications, I think?
Sure. So when we were forming ATEC, we needed someone to, we were getting massive floods incoming of people with labor issues. Not mostly foreign teachers, but not only foreign teachers. And at the time, there was basically no other place for them to turn. The Labor Standards Act we have today and the labor law protections we have today, along with the MOL system, the Korean Legal Aid Corporation, all that good stuff, most of it did not exist or was in a much different form back then. So we needed someone who could deal with all this labor stuff. So we were looking, at the time we were working with a rather famous labor attorney, someone who's long been ranked the #1 labor attorney in Korea. He still works for with PALS today. He's also my teacher.
Okay.
Him and he has a foreigner who basically acts as his paralegal. That's not his entire staff. He has one of the largest labor law firms in Korea as well. But those were the two I dealt with. And, this is the way a lot of people in Korea learn. What a lot of people fail to understand is that very few of the people you're talking to for legal advice ever went to law school. Okay, let me give you an example. There are 3 main types of lawyers in Korea. A byunhosa, which is an attorney at law. They can practice any form of law in any setting, anywhere, for any clients. Now, of course, you don't hire a real estate lawyer to handle medical malpractice, but byunhosa are the attorneys at law.
Okay.
And then there are nomusa. Nomusa translates to labor attorney in English. A labor attorney is someone who just takes a competency exam. Maybe they were a manager in a large company. Maybe they were an HR representative for years. They were a teacher. They have some other type of experience dealing with labor matters. Okay. Okay. They can go to the Ministry of Employment and Labor. They can take basically what amounts to a competency exam. And if they pass it, they're a certified labor attorney. They don't have to go to law school. Labor attorneys who do take classes typically take classes with other labor attorneys, same as I did.
Right.
I'm not a labor attorney. I'm just saying same method I used. Same way I was trained. Now, they can only represent clients at the Ministry of Employment and Labor or at the NLRC, the National Labor Relations Council. Okay. They cannot represent clients in civil court. Now, I hear all the time, well, I just finished a civil case and I had a nomusa. Like everything, there are exceptions. For example, if I'm a nomusa and you, Jack, are a byunhosa, if I'm working in your office under your management, under your direction, I can represent cases anywhere. I can argue cases in civil court, criminal court, administrative court, small claims, before the government, appeals, whatever, if I'm working under the supervision of a byunhosa. Okay. Right. So, no, just because somebody may have had a nomusa represent them somewhere besides MOL does not mean what I described is not the system. It means, like every system, it can be complicated. Okay. Now, the third type is called a 행정사. Okay. That translates to administrative lawyer in English. 행정사 represent clients at like administrative boards, in arbitration panels. Like if you want to appeal something that happened at immigration, that goes to an administrative board, so you can have a Hagwon for that, etc. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the three main types of lawyers in Korea. In that entire group, only one class goes to law school.
Right.
The Byunhosa.
Okay. So
everyone else does not go to law school, although you do have some people, like, for instance, the very famous labor attorney I mentioned earlier. I'm not saying his name because I forgot to ask him before this podcast if it was okay to say his name. However, sure. Members of PALS will instantly know who I'm talking about. So anyway, sometimes you get people, there are quotas in the Korean system. Mm-hmm. You know, only so many people are allowed to become Byunhosa.
Right.
You may have 4,000 people graduate law school in a year, and 20% of them are given a license. Okay? So what do you do with those other 80%? They become law professors. Some will go become Hagwon-sa, others will go become Nomusa, but they're not the norm.
Okay.
So you do get some who have been to law school, but most were trained by other Nomusa.
Okay, so which category do you fall under?
I was trained by a Nomusa.
Okay, so right, so that's a lot of legal jargon you would have to wrap your head around.
Tell me about it, man. You know, and I've been lucky over the years. I've had other great teachers come and go who taught me civil law, criminal law, employment law, which is not the same as labor, private schools, international, medical, pension, private pension. You know, I by far do not know everything, but I've had some incredible teachers, and I've learned a hell of a lot from them.
So how did you get involved with PALS? So this was like, PALS basically came out after ATAC, right? But I mean, where do you live right now, if you don't mind me asking?
Germany.
Right, which is pretty far away, right? And you've been basically gone from Korea for how many years now?
Since 2014.
Right, but you continue to maintain the PALS group, which a lot of people find very, very helpful, right? And like you yourself mentioned, and I've seen on the PALS group today, somebody left a message saying thank you. So you've helped a lot of people over the time. So 2014, this is 7 years ago, or no, 5 years ago. I got to work on my math. Why do you still continue to run the group if you're not really here? Like, how does that fit in with your life?
Well, to put it simply, when you put almost a decade of your life into something, through thousands of situations, thousands of people helped, you're not going to just say one day, wake up one morning and say, oh, okay, I don't feel like doing it anymore, bye-bye.
Sure.
You know, I've tried to find people over the years who could take it over. You know, they either weren't able to put the amount of time into it I could, or didn't have the drive to take the time and effort to learn what needed to be learned to do it properly.
Right.
And anyone who knows me, and you're in my group as well, if you don't mind me saying, since you already mentioned it, you see how hard I am about having one or two experiences in no way qualifies someone to comment on situations. I'm sure you saw the recent post where someone was who worked for a private university was asking about their pension situation. And the university had asked them to sign a certain document. Well, if they had signed that document, because they were leaving the university before their vesting period in the private pension, the Korean Teachers Pension Fund. If they had signed that document, the school would not have had to pay their share of that person's pension. Okay? And several people told him, "Oh, no problem, just sign it. That won't affect you."
Right.
And I'm just like, oh God. Thank you for the good effort. Thank you for the good intention, but no. And unfortunately, when I did that, there was one person whose only concern was not that they didn't have the right information or weren't able to adequately advise this person, was simply that they could say whatever they wanted, whenever they felt like, wherever they felt like, whenever they felt like.
Right.
And after trying to talk to him a couple times, I finally just had to say, "I'm sorry, this is not the group for you. Goodbye."
There's a question posted by Martin Ziegler, and I'm going to get to that question in a second.
I see it.
Yeah, okay. What I wanted to ask was, is like, so the work that, because I guess you're working in Germany, right? You must have some kind of income. So the work that you do, is that in any way, shape, or form related to what you do with PALS?
I'm teaching.
Okay, so teaching.
PALS has never been something that I've done professionally.
Okay.
It's literally, I like to help out.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough to acquire the skills and knowledge to be able to do so.
And so do you have any other, do you have a knowledge or understanding of other laws outside of Korea? So you've been trained on the Korean law, but do you have any other understanding, I don't know, as a hobby, have you acquired anything else related to the American law or North American or European, German? I don't know. There are too many probably to mention.
No.
Nothing.
Because it's not the law, that's my hobby.
Right, gotcha. So the question Martin Ziegler posted is, how fluent are you in Korean, listening, speaking, reading, writing? I guess the question arises probably from the idea of, if you were trained in Korean law under people who are Korean, how did that work, I guess, exactly?
한국어 말하고 쓰고 읽고 하지만 5년 준비 없습니다. 지금 5년 준비 없습니다. So it's been a long time, and when I was in Korea, 한국에서 제 한국어 4등급, 때때로 5등급, 지금 2등급. You know, what's the old saying? Use it or lose it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I've been here for a long time. My Korean is actually quite horrible, and you said some words that I'm not familiar with. So
okay, let me back up. I'll say it in English then. I can read, write, and speak Korean. At one time, I was around a high level 4, sometimes a level 5, depending on the subjects. However, it's been 5 years since I practiced with any consistency.
Right.
Use it or lose it.
Yeah.
I'm probably around a level 2 nowadays, simply through misuse.
Sure, but I assume that your reading is still there, because it seems to, most languages, when we forget, we lose the ability to communicate in the spoken word. But the way our brains work, we're usually, I think, able to recognize words or recall words when we see them, but we're not always able to recall them without actually having a visual prompt. So I would imagine that you can still read a lot more and understand more Korean than actually produce it.
My reading is still better than my speaking,
right?
But that's faded a lot too. I don't do it every day anymore. I have to admit, within the past year, there have been a few times when I was sitting there looking at someone's documents. I'm like, oh my God, I know that word. Don't do this to me. Come on, brain. and then I just had to break out the translator because it'd been too long. I just could not remember.
Okay, so let me ask you this here. So, like, we had a little brief discussion about a podcast a couple of weeks ago.
Can I pause you for 1 second?
Sure.
Martin just wrote something that I want to address directly.
Uh-huh.
Not correct, Martin. Korea has what's called the Ministry of Legislation. Yes, Korea has a Ministry for Legislation. They maintain an online database that publishes all Korean laws in Korean, Chinese, English, and I believe Vietnamese as well.
Which would give you access to the Korean law translated into English.
Correct.
Right.
Now, whereas I used to be able to read it in Korean as well, unfortunately, that's changed. And okay, I have to admit that yes, if I'd focused on maintaining my Korean a little more, perhaps I did get a little lazy and letting myself lapse.
Well, if you're leaving the country and not really planning on returning, like I used to speak fluent German when I was a kid, and I haven't used it in years, and basically my retention is minuscule. Whenever I happen to talk to my friends in Germany, I hear words and I know that I used to know them, but the meaning of them literally escapes me. It's like the tip of the tongue phenomena where you know the word, you're missing the connection to connect it to the appropriate meaning.
Yep, I know exactly what you mean. In fact, Martin, who keeps posting in the chat here, Martin is native German. His German is his first language. He actually helps me with some of my situations in Germany because my German is rather poor. Thanks again for all the help you've given me in that regard, Martin. Hope you don't mind me mentioning it now. But he also speaks English fluently, and I forgot what level his Korean is, but I know it's good.
Really? Fantastic. Okay, so let me jump to a couple of weeks ago. This was at the onset of the summer holidays, and I held a podcast about Korean Airlines, and then I was talking about holidays or time off for employees in Korea, and I was looking at some things that I dug up on the internet, which basically talked about what constitutes as part-time hours and what constitutes as full-time hours in Korea, and how much time can be given off to an employee who works, a certain amount of hours per week or per month. And you had some comments on that. Maybe if you do you remember the podcast? You mentioned it earlier.
I did get to started to listen to a few minutes of it, then I got wrapped up with other things.
Yeah. So basically, that was the question. So maybe if you could, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding or confusion about things like, what's required. How many hours a week or a month does an English teacher, I guess? Because usually the questions come from English teachers.
Okay.
How many hours a week or a month do you have to work in order to be qualified for overtime pay, I guess? And so what I dug up was that it was 40 hours, and anything after that should be paid as overtime. But according to what you mentioned, it would depend on the contract. So maybe if you could shed some light on that.
Oh, you've just mentioned 3 different subjects there, and each one is an in-depth. Each one is an in-depth answer. So let me back you up. Do you want the holidays answer? Do you want the part-time, full-time answer, or do you want the contracts answer?
The one that's most helpful to people. Martin just wrote something which looks like Austrian, not really German, unless this is from Bayern.
You'd have to ask Martin. I'm not sure if if his native language is Australian German or German German. I'm sorry, Austrian German or German German.
Yeah, that's not.
You'd have to ask him for which dialect. But I'm trying to focus on the subject.
Yes. So a question that would be most helpful to people teaching in Korea.
Okay, let's start with the part-time, full-time hours.
Okay.
Okay, there are several different answers here. If you're asking from the perspective of labor law, what is part-time, what is full-time? Typically, less than 20 hours in labor law would be part-time, and anything over 20 hours would be full-time.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if you're asking from the perspective of immigration, employer-sponsored visas, basically the E-Series visas, minus, of course, the family-dependent E-visa, they require you work full-time. The immigration regulations require full-time work. They typically do not issue an employer-sponsored visa based on part-time work. So why are you working part-time? I can hear a lot of people asking that right now. Because, simply put, your employer provided a fake schedule to immigration, showing that you were working at or above the minimum required amount of hours for you to get that visa.
All right. So
why does this not affect you with labor? Because labor is a separate ministry. Each ministry is in charge of enforcing the laws covered by their ministry. They also promulgate the rules and regulations that define what that law is within the purview of their ministry. Now, here's the weakness in the Korean system. Labor is concerned about labor law. They are not concerned about immigration. In Korean culture, it would be an insult for people at labor to learn about the immigration system, because it would be the same as telling the Ministry of Justice and the Office of Immigration, you're not competent to do your job, so we have to learn it and do it for you. And vice versa, why does immigration not worry about labor law or the work of Powell? Simple. Their work is immigration. It's not labor law. It's not employment law. It's not employer relations. Their job is to make sure you meet the terms of your visa. If you don't, it's not their problem that you have a labor issue that prevents you from doing that. Their problem is you were required to do it and you didn't. Okay? Why, when you're worried about your health insurance and pension enrollment, do they not care that you have an E-Series visa or that you have a complaint against your employer at Powell? For the exact same reason. Their NPS's job is pension. NHIS's job is health insurance. Their job is not immigration. Their job is not labor law. NPS's job is not health insurance. NHIS's job is not pension. They don't care. They don't know about it. They're not trained in it. They can't address it.
Okay.
So you go.
So according to the labor law, 20 hours below 20 hours of work per week is considered part-time. Above that is full-time. When would the labor law consider overtime as necessary for the amount of hours that are being worked?
Okay, so this is where we get into what with Powell is a gray area. Notice I'm emphasizing here with Powell.
What is Powell?
Ministry of Employment and Labor.
Okay.
Their job is to enforce the Labor Standards Act, not contracts law. Contracts law is a civil issue, a civil court issue. Powell applies the Labor Standards Act. Okay? Under the Labor Standards Act, what is overtime could be different than what is in your contract.
Okay.
So if your contract says you work 30 hours a week, yes, by law, anything over 30 hours a week should be overtime. Now, there is some room for the employer to adjust a few hours from the next week to offset the extra 2 hours you worked the previous week. Things like that, under which those 2 hours would not be overtime, just as an example.
Mm-hmm.
But in the general setting of things, under the Labor Standards Act, overtime is 44 hours.
44 hours.
That was reduced from 48 hours.
Okay.
Well, that's overtime. What you're referring to is extended hours. Extended hours is a different situation.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that? The extended hours, because I don't think that ever comes up in a conversation.
If you work more than 8 hours in a day, they have to pay 150% of normal wages.
Mm-hmm.
If that is not overtime, that's over 8 hours. That's extended hours. That's where you come up to the 40 hours a week. Now, if that happens to be on a Saturday, it can end up being more than 150. On a Sunday, it can end up being 200, depending on how it's argued. But frankly, unless you're in civil court with a major claim against the employer, you're likely to never see that money.
I don't think too many people ever have.
Yeah. I love it when I explain this to people, and then they jump over to another group on Facebook where they got a few people who have had one or two situations. Oh, no, that's not how it worked in my one situation over here in Daegu. Even though you're in a separate labor office and a separate labor jurisdiction that operates under different local regulations, rules, and policies than my office in Daegu. So it must be exactly the same over there because they just don't understand the system.
So these things will also vary regionally. It's not like one and the same law for the entire country. Every district or legislature will have its own set of rules, so to speak, right?
Not necessarily. You and I have had this conversation before. You've noticed that when you read these laws are often written as broad frameworks.
Right.
Sometimes they have specific points, sometimes they do not. It's left open to what may appear to be open to interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So you have national offices of MOL. You have regional offices of MOL. And then you have local, also called district offices of MOL. Each level there has different authorities within MOL. And each level has directors that set policies, rules, and procedures for their level of authority.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Well, the office over here in Gwangju is one district. It doesn't have under one regional office. The office over here in, say, Mokpo is not in the same district. It may be in the same region. So it's not going to have the same district rules, policies, and procedures, and likely won't have the same regional rules, policies, and procedures.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's the surface. You also have to consider the fact that the Korean system is designed to have the flexibility to address individual situations. Okay?
Okay.
So not only do you have different jurisdictions at the district and regional levels, not only do those different jurisdictions have different directors with different policies, rules, and procedures, when you go to those offices, the person who's in charge of dealing with situations like yours also has to decide which of the rules, policies, and procedures apply to your unique situation.
Right.
Okay, so that's why one or two situations does not qualify a person to know the system. That's why having an experience over here in Daegu does not mean you will have the same experience in Seoul, Incheon, Gwangju, Daegu, Mokpo, or any other city you want to name.
So,
okay,
basically,
it also means that you and I can walk into the exact same district office, be sent to two separate people, and even though we have the exact same situation with the same employer, the same immigration status, the same contracts, and we can walk out with two different answers.
Okay. So, based on what you just said, it's almost like, well, you can never really know exactly what constitutes as, so in which case you would be able to get overtime or not, because you could take two separate instances at two different Hagwons, and depending on what jurisdiction they fall under and what the contracts are and the size of the Hagwon themselves or the business type, it will all vary. It'll all be different. So there's no way to really know unless you get some serious legal help.
It doesn't have to be serious legal help. This is how they treat you, an individual walking in who does not know the system, who's leaving everything up to their interpretation, who does not know what applies to you, what does not apply, what the different options are, what this person's authority is, how to convince, what you need to say to get them to consider something else, etc. Okay, which again goes to why I'm always so big on cracking down, and you see it all over PALS, on the people who are just like, commenting based on their few different situations or experiences. And that's why I always tell people, we need to talk privately. I need to do an evaluation of your situation. I'm going to need to get some information from you, and then we're going to have to decide whether or not you can do this on your own, or if you're going to require a lawyer to do it. Because the same as in every other legal system in the world, you are going to be treated much differently when you have a lawyer, whether it be a Nomusa, Henjonsa, or Byonhosa, who knows that system and knows all the stuff you don't. Then you're going to be treated just walking in there by yourself with none of that knowledge.
Right. So what do you say to people who do need help, legal help? Do you have some directions in which to point them?
Okay. We used to work with several lawyers. Some of them have retired. Some of them have gone on to make their own legal help group. Others have we don't work with anymore for various reasons. I have to be careful there because of Korean's defamation laws. But let's just say I've said the door's over there, goodbye. So I do have lawyers I can put people in touch with. For example, a rather famous foreign attorney who runs his own Facebook group now advising people. He worked with PALS for a long time, and I got to know him personally. Great guy. He may be listening in tonight, I don't know. But this past weekend, I had a group that needed a seriously good lawyer. Quick message to him, and they got someone who is more than qualified for the situation they have.
Right.
With the types of lawyers I'm describing right now would typically be considered in the top 1% of lawyers in the country.
Okay. And so in case of like disputes or whatever, employee-employer disputes, I've been on, I don't remember which group that was, but one of the Facebook groups. In any case, the discussion always was that whatever the case is, whatever the dispute between the employer and employee is, or maybe even in some other situations, whenever it comes to disputes between or legal matters, or sorry, when it comes to cases that are taken in front of the judicial system, it's highly likely that the foreigner or the expat foreigner will most likely lose in those cases.
No. If you're I'm reminded of the old adage, a person who represents themselves as a fool for a client. You don't speak it always amazes me how many people who think they can just take care of it themselves based on one or two comments they've read, and they have one or two comments they've heard, and maybe a paragraph they read in the Labor Standards Act. Okay, let me give you a few examples. The Labor Standards Act is the minimum. That's what a lot of people don't realize. Above the Labor Standards Act, you have rules of employment, you have contracts, you have the local policies and procedures. Some offices have different focuses than others. Plus, if you go into MOL representing yourself, there are many situations where that labor inspector is not there to say, okay, this party is right or that party is right. They're there to say, okay, I'm an arbitrator, what's the middle ground? Whereas you're thinking, oh, he's going to decide for me and give me all my money, and then you walk out of there, huh, what happened? Why did he only give me 3 million won? It happens all the time. Plus, when you go to, a lot of people don't understand that when they go to civil court on their own, typically you hear this from people who have an order from MOL, and MOL told them to go talk to the civil court, okay, because the person didn't pay. What they don't understand there is what they're doing is called a request for a collections order. Okay. A request for a collections order can be represented by anyone. I can literally grab that drunk bum down at the train station when I just got off the subway, bring him into the civil court for me and tell him to argue for my collections order. And the court will accept it because anyone can argue for a collections order. It does not require an attorney. Okay. What they also don't understand is it's still a civil court hearing. That employer can come in and make their argument all over again, and the judge decides, yeah, I don't know what MOA was thinking. There's nothing for you to collect on here. When all you thought was you're just going in there to hand them that little piece of paper that MOA gave you. That's all you need to do, and they're going to order this person to pay. No, not at all. Not at all.
Right.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Or should I?
No.
I'm not trying to drag out every single answer. The situation here is, as I told you before we came on air, it's not as simple as just reading something in the Labor Standards Act and that's the end-all, be-all of it. Sure. And by the way, I just remembered the other term I was trying to remember earlier when I was saying there are things above the Labor Standards Act. There are types of employers. For example, Hagwons fall under the Labor Standards Act. Private schools fall under the Higher Education Act, the Private Schools Act. Some things are covered by employee handbooks and rules of employment. Some things may be left to the Labor Standards Act. It's a whole mess. And when you go to MOL, they may not have the authority to hear that because they're hearing it based on the Labor Standards Act, whereas when the employer doesn't pay, You go over to civil court to ask for a collections order. The employer walks in and says, yeah, it never should have been at Mole, Your Honor, because here's our rules of employment and here's our employee handbook. They agreed to ABC, and because you don't know what the hell that employer is talking about, that employer just got away with pulling a fast one on the judge that you're not going to get your collections order, you're not going to get your money, you're never going to understand why, because you went at it by yourself and didn't listen when people like me tried to tell you it's not that easy, you need to get legal advice.
Right, so that's good advice. It's not all doomsday for people here, but like you said, lawyer up. If you have a case that is serious enough for you to pursue, then make sure to get some legal advice before you start jumping, because I mean you're in an environment
Absolutely.
that you don't know anything about, really. Like, you know, most people, like you said, are not really versed in legal matters back home even. So now you find yourself in a country that is completely foreign, in addition to the complexities that it entails in the legal system.
A prime example I can give you of this is the 2017 International Schools crackdown. We all know about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we all
I've
know
heard
about the
that, yeah.
teachers who were teaching subject on E2 visas.
Right.
Because the schools only had Hagwon licenses, and you know the
But
teachers
we're calling
got
themselves
deported.
international schools, right?
Right, yeah. Right, and the teachers got deported for violating their visas and everything else.
Right.
Okay, at that time, I was going around the groups and I was advising everybody, do not accept the one-year visa ban. Mm-hmm. I don't care which immigration investigator or how many lawyers your employer brought in.
Sorry, can you just clarify what a one-year visa ban is exactly?
When immigration says, okay, we're deporting you, you can't return for 1 year.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to explain to everybody. I went through all the Facebook groups, I approached all the teachers I could find. Do not accept that visa ban. It is not what they're portraying to you. You will not be returning in 1 year. Okay? Or 2 years, or however long the ban was for.
Right.
Okay? And, you know, a lot of them chose to listen to their employers, or the employers brought in slick-talking lawyers, or I was attacked all over these various groups. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not even in Korea. That's not how the system works, blah, blah, blah. I was banned from at least 24 groups being told, you have no clue what you're talking about, you're full of shit, etc. Okay, now, tell me how many posts you saw 1 year later of people begging, help me, help me, help me, my 1 year ban is over, but they won't let me return.
Right. Personally, I haven't, but I do recall the schools getting cracked down upon, so.
Right. Why did that second part happen? Yes, it was a 1 year visa ban, but as I tried to explain to everyone back then, that gives you a record of immigration violation in Korea. Korea typically waits 4 to 5 years, sometimes longer, from the end of the visa ban before they will issue a new visa to someone who violated immigration rules and policies.
Right.
So 1 year later, here come all these people. Help, please, please help. We can't return to Korea. I'm sorry, I can't help you. But. You know, you tried to help us before. Why won't you help us now?
Right.
I told you 1 year ago.
Yeah.
You could not accept this ban. You accepted it. The only time you could have appealed was then. You had to get in the group I told you to get into with a lawyer and appeal at the Immigration Administrative Board that the punishment was too harsh and you were not responsible for it. But you chose to accept the ban, and no, I told you cannot return in 1 year. Well, now you know.
Right.
It's too late. It's too late to appeal. There is nothing I can do for you.
And I'm sure employers were putting enough pressure on the teachers to actually go through with signing the agreement.
Right, because because what that also did for the employers was it took the onus off of them.
Right.
The employees accepted the majority of the onus by accepting the visa ban. So instead of getting 25 million won fines per employee, maybe 1,500,000, 2 million total.
Right.
A little slap on the finger.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, bad boy, don't do that again. Because the teachers took the majority share of the responsibility.
I've had my own little share of that happening to me through a recruiter, which is why I swore I would never work through a recruiter again for a similar reason. Basically, I was cuckolded into passing off the responsibility, or actually taking on a lot more responsibility for what happened. Basically suckered into it because I didn't really know. I figured it out later. It kind of hit me flat in the face, and I said never again.
Right, and again, this is why I'm so hard on people who want to advise others based on having 3 or 4 experiences. First of all, if you've had 3 or 4 experiences, you're horrible at choosing employers, and you shouldn't be advising anyone on anything. I'm sorry for those listening, but it's true.
Right. So
second, it does not qualify you. Reading 1 chapter of the Labor Standards Act does not qualify you to advise. And by the way, let me fill in something that got lost in the shuffle earlier. Mm-hmm. How do you get your overtime pay? Number 1, you go in there with a no musa who can argue with the labor inspector for that overtime pay. Or number 2, it's a contractual matter. If there's enough money involved, you take it to civil court. Number 3, you can't just claim that you worked it. You have to be able to prove that you worked it, whether it's voice recording, whether it's company schedules, whether it's statements from supervisors saying those were the hours you worked. You have to be able to prove you actually worked the hours you claim you proved.
So that's a good tip, because I think most people don't actually keep track of the hours they work, or maybe they do it on their own, but they never have an employer sign underneath the schedule that they worked for the past week, which could be a good thing to have, right?
Right, and they wonder why employers who do keep time clocks refuse to give them copies of it.
Right.
Or they wonder why employers who refuse to print out their hours on a written schedule. Oh, what? I've already told you your hours. What? It's the same Tuesday hours you've worked for the last 3 months. Why are you stressing me out? Why are you making me do extra work to print this out for you and put it in writing? Right. They're acting. They're refusing to print it out and put it in writing for you, because if you ever find out they're screwing you over on the pay, they've just handed you evidence you can use to get paid.
Right. So the best advice out there for all the teachers out there, or all the people who are working here in South Korea, would be to stay sharp and keep solid track of the hours that you worked, and like John said, in some kind of written form, or something that's confirmed by the employer themselves, so that in case of something happens, that you have that record, and you can take it to the legal advisor and actually have record of how much you worked.
What I always tell people to do is keep a notebook. Write this in Korean, day, date, start time, end time. Take it to a head teacher or the owner. Get them to sign it. Not initial it, sign it. And the best is to get them to use that little personal stamp. Right. Because the personal stamp is the ultimate confirmation in Korea. Right. A signature is good, but I could just write an I, put a line, and say, huh? Right. Who's I? That's not my signature. Here's an example of my signature. you can't do it with the stamp. The stamp is absolutely theirs. Now you
Right.
got to know that it's their stamp. You got to be able to read it and know that's their name in the stamp. But that stamp is the ultimate,
Right.
far above and beyond signature.
Right. Very good advice, John. So we've hit the 1 hour mark basically, and we've tried
I
to keep
told
it.
you it wasn't going to be as
within a-
fast as you
Well,
thought.
I never expected it. I mean, that's any legal matters are things that should be discussed over years and months probably.
Yeah.
But
Man.
so that leaves us a window open for possible future sit downs and further discussions on maybe more specific matters. This was kind of like a get to know each other and listen to what you had to say, and it was really good information because it gave me personally a little bit of a better glimpse at how the legal system works and the small intricacies. But like I said, maybe this is a good opportunity for us to think about possible future meetings here on the podcast.
Absolutely, would be happy to do it. Get the subjects together. I can be, as I said before, if you have specific subjects, I can be much more detailed in the answers than like today where we just had general points.
Yeah. So possibly, I guess if we could choreograph it somehow, have either a poll set up. I can set up a poll on my Living Korea Facebook group, and you could do the same in PALS and possibly see what topics people would be interested in hearing.
Or you can do it in PALS. I have no problem with that.
Okay, so set up a poll and then see. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that people would be very interested in hearing more about, and so I think we could totally get that going. So that would be fantastic.
Absolutely, would be happy to.
Great. So let me just ask you one more question. Like, since you are quite far away, and like you said, you've invested, a significant amount of time into running this group. How, where are you planning on going with this? How long are you planning on continuing that?
That's been a subject for a long time. For example, I've already handed off the day-to-day management of the group to the second admin. I don't have permission to say his name. Didn't have time to talk to him before I did this because I've been wrapped up in a big in teacher situation for another international school.
Right.
But I've said for years, I've been gone for a while. I don't have the time to keep up with all the new changes and regulations or court precedents. Over time, my ability to help is fading. There will come a point where it is no longer effective help and I have to bow out. Hopefully, before we ever reach that point, I can find someone who will put in the time and is competent enough to do it.
Right.
Don't know if that'll happen or not.
Or how soon.
That too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, John, thank you very much for coming on, for agreeing to do this podcast with me here. And hopefully...
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. And hopefully we can do this again in the near future. And until then, I'm gonna switch over and we'll have some closing comments here. Is there anything else, like your last closing words, a piece of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience, with the people listening?
Well, I wasn't trying to get off in any diatribes today. It really there really is this much information behind all those subjects. I hope it gives people a clearer picture of why I get so in depth and why I'm always like, okay, look, thank you for your effort, but you should not be making these comments. It doesn't work like that.
Right. Great. Okay. Thanks a lot, John. Thank you again. And hopefully we'll get to do this one more time sometime soon.
Sounds good. Good night, sir.
Good night. And that's it from John for tonight. That was a very good conversation. I'm glad that John agreed to do this with me. Very helpful information. Hopefully there were some people out there who were able to listen in and get some helpful info from it, and I hope that we can get together with John. And like I said, I will post some questions on the Living Korea channel and see if I can maybe possibly also post some questions on the Ulsan Online group, because there is a large community of people who may be able to benefit from questions, from legal advice, I guess, of this type. But that's something to be worked on. If you are here and you're listening in, we've had a small number of viewers today, 10 current viewers, fantastic. If you are here and if you do have any questions, any legal matters pertaining to South Korea and working here, then please let me know in the comment section. You can also go to the Living Korea Facebook group and leave a comment there. You can also go to the PALS group on Facebook and talk to John directly. If you have any questions, specific questions, you can do that as well. If you would like I said, if you would like to have any other questions answered, I will post a poll on Living Korea, and hopefully to get some answers there as well. In the meantime, this will conclude our short little chat. If you're new to this podcast, and if you enjoyed this information, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, thumbs up, notification button for further and future videos, and always, if you're in search of a Hagwon, if you're interested in starting your own Hagwon here in South Korea, make sure to give me a buzz. This show has been sponsored and supported by Shane English Korea, always has, always will be. And we here on the Living Korea podcast and on the Living Korea channel support Ulsan Online, which is an expat community built by expats for expats, and running here in Ulsan for many years now. And that's gonna be it. So thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to come back on Wednesday. There's gonna be more videos from Living Korea. Click like button now, Sylvia says. That's right, thank you, Sylvia. Make sure to come back on Wednesday for new videos, and we'll see you then. Have a good night, everyone. Have a good weekend. Have a good week after the tiresome Monday I'm sure everybody had. Good night.